Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're tackling a classic question, one that seems, well, simple on the surface, but gets surprisingly tangled the deeper you go.
Oh, yeah. Which one is that?
Which came first, chess or checkers?
Ah, right. It feels like it should be obvious, doesn't it? I mean, one is just legendary for its complexity. The other feels much more straightforward.
Exactly. But the history, the historical accounts, and the archaeology, they paint a really interesting picture. It's actually sparked quite a bit of debate over the years.
Yeah, I can imagine. Different pieces of evidence pointing different ways, perhaps.
Precisely. We've dug into some fascinating material looking at the origins of both games. And our mission, really, is to unpack this history, see what the evidence truly suggests about their timelines.
And maybe understand a bit more about why these two games, despite being so different, have stuck around for so long.
You got it.
Yeah.
So, where should we start? Maybe with the claims for the earliest origins.
Okay, let's get into it. When we look at the earliest origins presented in the sources, one of these games goes way back.
Right. Diving into the history presented. The oldest known game board that really looks like modern checkers, sometimes called drafts. Of course, it dates back incredibly far.
How far are we talking?
We're talking around 3000 BC.
3000 BC. Wow. Okay, so that places its roots firmly in ancient Mesopotamia. And what's really striking, as some accounts describe it, is that archaeologists apparently found a board there, with a familiar grid pattern along with tokens.
Really suggesting an early form of the game we play today.
Exactly. It's, well, obviously not a perfect match. Games evolve, right? But the core setup, that basic grid and moving pieces, seems eerily similar across millennia.
It's kind of mind-blowing. Just imagine people playing a version of checkers thousands of years ago in Mesopotamia. That really puts things in perspective.
It certainly does.
But, okay, if checkers potentially goes back that far, where does that leave chess? Is it anywhere near the same timeline according to this material?
Well, that's where the big contrast emerges. The evidence we looked at points to chess having a much later origin.
Much later.
Yeah, the consensus in these sources traces its beginnings to the 6th century AD in India.
6th century AD. So hold on, that's a difference of nearly, what, 4,000 years?
Potentially, yeah. Based on the archaeological records cited for checkers and the historical texts describing early chess. At that time in India, it was known as chaturanga.
Chaturanga.
Right. And while it's clearly the ancestor of modern chess, its rules and piece movements were quite different from what we see today. Not quite the game we recognize immediately.
Okay, so just...
Exactly. This is where it gets really interesting. Chess, for instance, didn't just sit still after it appeared as chaturanga. It went through these massive transformations as it traveled.
Traveled where?
Well, it spread from India to Persia, then through the Islamic world, and eventually landed in Europe. And it was evolving with each step.
So it wasn't just moving geographically, it was changing.
Constantly changing. It was a continuous reinvention, really. Some descriptions explain how this spread and adaptation fundamentally altered the game. New pieces were introduced, their movements became more powerful.
Like the queen. Wasn't she weaker initially?
Exactly. Think of the queen. She was a relatively weak piece early on, like could only move one square diagonally, I think. And then she became the absolute powerhouse we know today. All these changes added incredible strategic depth and complexity.
Wow. There is one source that used a really beautiful analogy for this. Comparing chess's journey, it was like moving from listening to a simple tune to experiencing a full orchestral symphony.
That's a perfect way to visualize it, yeah. It really captures how adding new elements and strategic possibilities just layered the game over centuries.
So chess becomes this complex symphony. What about checkers then? Did it have a similar evolution?
Well, checkers, in contrast, is noted in the material for largely retaining its core straightforward gameplay. Its relative simplicity seems to have remained pretty consistent over that same vast period.
Yes, and the sources suggest that this simplicity isn't seen as a limitation, but actually as a core part of its enduring appeal. It's easy to learn, it's accessible.
Right, enjoyable for people of all ages. Across different cultures, it's just easier to pick up.
Definitely.
But, that accessibility doesn't mean it lacks value. The sources also touch upon the different kinds of benefits these games offer.
Okay, how so?
Well, while checkers is praised for being accessible, chess is often highlighted for its cognitive benefits, things like promoting strategic thinking, forward planning, problem-solving skills.
Right, you often see it used in educational settings for that reason, or in programs, say, for seniors to help keep minds sharp.
Exactly. That intellectual challenge is a huge draw for many people. It's like a mental workout, but,
A
fun.
mental workout disguised as fun. Yeah.
And we shouldn't overlook the social dimension either, which the
Yes.
sources also bring up.
Oh, yeah.
While chess can definitely involve intense one-on-one competition, checkers is often noted more for fostering camaraderie and socialization. The kind of vibe you might see in, like, long-standing community clubs playing in a park.
Right, that makes sense. So both games, despite all their differences in complexity or maybe even age, ultimately serve as these wonderful opportunities for bringing people together, for community building, for connection over a shared activity.
Absolutely. And ultimately, the material suggests that preferring one over the other often just comes down to personal taste. Does someone seek the deep strategic puzzle of chess? Or maybe the more casual, perhaps more immediately social game of checkers?
Okay, so let's try and pull back a bit from our deep dive here. Looking at the historical evidence we've explored, it does seem to strongly indicate that checkers has roots potentially stretching way back to that incredible 3000 BC period in Mesopotamia,
Hmm.
which, would make it the elder game when compared to chess, which seems to have emerged around the 6th century AD in India as chaturanga.
Yes, that's definitely a timeline suggested by the findings presented in these sources. But as we've discussed, just saying which came first only kind of scratches the surface, doesn't it?
It really does. The real story seems to be in the very different paths they took after that.
Exactly. Checkers largely stayed true to its simple, accessible form, which ensured its broad appeal across ages and cultures.
While chess went through this dramatic evolution, transforming over centuries into the incredibly complex strategic game we know today.
And they offer distinct, yet equally valuable forms of engagement. Chess pushing our strategic thinking, checkers providing that accessible fun, and maybe fostering more casual social bonds. Neither is better, just different experiences.
Experiences that have brought joy and challenge to countless people over millennia.
For sure.
So it seems the true insight here isn't really about declaring a winner in the age contest or even complexity, but maybe appreciating the unique journey each game took and the distinct forms of engagement they offer.
Well put. Which perhaps raises an interesting question for you, the listener, to consider.
Oh.
What is it about games, whether they're incredibly ancient and seemingly simple, like maybe early checkers was, or complex and ever-evolving like chess became, what allows them to not just survive, but actually thrive for thousands of years and connect people across vast distances, cultures, and generations?
That's a great question. Something to keep thinking about as you go about your day.